It's a question about the Islamicity of the concept of consciousness. It's an interesting question. In contemporary Arabic, I guess that consciousness is represented by something akin to the idea of wa'i, that not only do we have senses, but we have the responsibility to process the information supplied by those senses. So the Holy Quran says, وَلِتَعْيَهَا أُذُنٌ وَاعِيَةٌ, so that a conscious ear might hear them. Very often we don't correctly process information supplied to us from the outside world. There isn't what the ancients used to call al-hiss al-mushtarak, which was the sensus communis, which was that part of the human consciousness or mind which took on board the enormous amount of information that's fed to us by the five senses and filters out that which is extraneous. So that part of consciousness on that basic level is that the sense of sight might feed to us in every instant thousands of individual pieces of information, but there's something in the mind that filters out everything that's irrelevant so that, as it were, the system doesn't crash. That's the most basic element of consciousness, which is a material function, essentially what they would call al-hiss al-mushtarak. But higher than that, there is the subtle aspect of the apperception of subjects, which is the way in which memory, al-quwwat al-hafizah in the traditional Islamic vocabulary, is aligned with this capacity to filter out and filter in information supplied from the outside world, and to engage that with the ruh, the spirit. And that is a very subtle thing. That the hardest thing to speak about in traditional religion is the nature of the soul. Imam al-Ghazali says that this is something tahayyara fihi al-aktharun. Most people are bewildered by it. And the Quran itself says, وَيَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الرُّوحِ قُلِ الرُّوحُ مِنْ أَمْرِ رَبِّي وَمَا أُوتِيتُم مِنَ الْعِلْمِ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا. They ask you about the ruh. They went to the Holy Prophet ﷺ and asked him about this ruh. What is it that's the essence of our perception, of having perceptions in the world and of processing decisions? What is it? قُلِ الرُّوحُ مِنْ أَمْرِ رَبِّي. The spirit is of the command of my Lord, and of knowledge you have been given but little. And in contemporary philosophy of mind, the definition of consciousness turns out to be the hardest of all issues. The issue of artificial intelligence nowadays, for instance, is very much on the philosophical agenda. Endless conferences about the possibility of the internet, for instance, acquiring consciousness. What happens if the internet, which is now at least as complex as the average human brain, one day acquires consciousness and actually starts to communicate with us? And philosophers often talk about that, and sometimes theologians as well. What happens if one day, for instance, I get an email from the internet itself, and the internet says, at 3 o'clock this morning I achieved consciousness, and I've looked at all of the information about religions that are stored on my database, and I have a lot of information, and I've decided I want to take Shahada, so what should I do? It's the kind of idea that philosophers of mind are playing with at the moment. Generally, the view seems to be that there's no sign of consciousness appearing in purely mechanical structures such as the internet. That however intricate the internet becomes and how well it seems able to reproduce many of the workings of the human brain in terms of the selection of data and the storage of data, it is still a million miles away from achieving that mysterious thing that we call consciousness. There's no sign that the internet or any other artificial or robotic intelligence is capable of acquiring that most mysterious thing. And that is really the sirr al-adamiyya, that is the secret of humanity and the secret of allama Adam al-asma'a kullaha. He taught Adam all of the names. That there is a sense in which a device, a mechanical substrate, cannot be taught the names, because those names have ethical dimensions which presuppose really enfleshment in a body. Justice and mercy and nurturing and all of those things are specific to humanity, and they are part of our consciousness. So just to sum that up, one could say that the nearest we can get to a definition of consciousness in our traditional understanding is that it is that thing that we acquire when we follow the prophetic commandment, تَخَلَّقُوا بِأَخْلَاقِ اللَّهِ, acquire the qualities of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that left to our own devices, we have certain bestial tendencies in which we share with the world of the Baha'im, the animals, and even the plants, which don't have a consciousness in any kind of recognizable human sense, because they're not capable of moral processing. To the extent that we overcome that nafs hayawaniya or nafs bahimiya and acquire something that is higher, a nafs al-natiqa, the articulate, the logical, the discursive soul, which is through acquiring these qualities that are in the divine and are not intrinsic in the world, then we acquire the mystery of consciousness. And it's very important as an aspect of spiritual growth as well, that not to have a consciousness is in a sense to be an animal or even to be dead. And to have a consciousness is to be alive and to really be an agent in the world, in the sense that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wishes us to be, which is the sirr of the khilafah in this world. Only Adam alayhi salam has that capacity, despite the fact that he sheds blood and yufsidu fiha, causes corruption in it. His descendants can do that, but the angels are still commanded to bow down to him. Why is that? Because he has this ruh within him and this capacity to be activated by these divine names that make him, in this mysterious, extraordinary way, a legitimate qibla for the angels, which is, again, one of the ways in which the Holy Quran explains this mystery of the ruh. It is the ruh which is from the affair of Allah that these angels are bowing down to. Fully conscious human beings are realized human beings through having acquired their theomorphic properties in terms of recovering their Adamic perfection. To the extent that we have those names of justice, of strength, of mercy, of gentleness, those divine qualities within ourselves in due balance, we actually have an activated higher consciousness. To the extent that those things are out of balance or not activated at all, then we're just part of the material world. But it's a good question, because I think ultimately human language cannot come up with an adequate definition of that thing which is the most mysterious phenomenon that we experience in the world, namely the mystery that not only is there a universe out there, but that the universe is knowable and that it can be appropriated and understood. And actually Professor Guidardoni, a couple of weeks ago when he came to Cambridge, talked about these galaxies and showed us pictures of the Hubble deep fields and talked about these extraordinary things, said that the deepest mystery of it all for the cosmologist is not the fact that the universe is there and so multiple and so brilliant and so orderly, but the fact that it can be understood. That's where science really breaks down, that there can be a consciousness that actually sees the universe and seeks to understand it and to appropriate it. So that again is وَمَا أُوتِيتُم مِّنَ الْعِلْمِ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا. You've only been given a little knowledge.